forgetting. Okay.
There you go. Got it. And I'm going to mute myself because I don't,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. And I see Tom is here, but it looks like he's still trying to connect to audio. Well, okay. We do not yet have a quorum, but we can start just doing some general discussion. I don't know that there's a lot of things that we need to make decisions on tonight. There are a few, and we'll leave those towards the end when we've got to maybe have a quorum, although I don't know if we will. But the first part of the meeting is probably basically going to be updates on things that have been going on. And some of you may have already heard some of it. I think we talked about some of it last time, although I don't know that, I'm not sure whether any of you were here. Leonora was here last month. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, and why don't we start off with that, which is we'll talk about a little bit about the Shops at the Ridge Phase 2 site. And I have a couple of new things to report and just a reminder about some old things. One, which I mentioned last month, is I talked to the people from Terramar Retail, TRC, Terramar Retail Centers, that's a C. And they, again, as I mentioned, they said they were sending someone out there to look at the site, and I understand that I haven't been out there, but I've heard from a few people that there's some significant effort going into cleaning up the site, which is a good news. I don't know if have any of you been over there and looked at it?
Yes, I've walked past it a few times. They've
Yeah.
cleaned up a lot of the trash and the overgrown ivy where the rats were and all of that. But the last time I went past, they hadn't taken down that rickety temporary fence.
Yeah, and I don't know that they will until they've got something decided more what they want to do in the long run. And I think that may be something we talk to them about when we meet with them.
Yeah, because it's about to take itself down in places.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, too, to chime in here a little bit, students have been, tossing, their trash. Yeah. They stop at Safeway, buy something to eat, whatever, and then, thank you, exactly, 3 points. And the fence at least keeps them from taking it deeper into the lot.
Yeah.
But,
So that it just in terms of long-term maintenance, it would make sense for them to do something more permanent than that temporary fence. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned last time, they are doing some drilling there. Someone mentioned to me that they'd seen the drilling trucks out there, and I don't know if I mentioned this the last time or not, but they said the reason why they're doing the drilling is that it's at the behest of the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and what's going on there is that if you remember back when they had the old buildings there, one of those tenants there was a dry cleaner. And one of the things about dry cleaners is some of you may be familiar with, there's a chemical called perchloroethylene. And it is what used to be the solvent that when you would get stuff from the dry cleaner, it always had that dry cleaner smell. That was perc. And as it turns out, it's a rather nasty chemical. And pretty much any place where there's been a dry cleaner, there's perc contamination in the soil. It just ends up getting in there. And so there was contamination there, and they are now trying to figure out exactly how far it's gotten and how much of it there is. And the main thing they want to make sure of is that it doesn't get down into the groundwater, which, given that the site is just right above bedrock, it doesn't seem very likely that it's going to get into groundwater because there's probably not much in the way of groundwater there. I think I would guess that the rock is down maybe 5 feet or 10, maybe 10 feet at most underground, and so there's not much space for groundwater to be. But at any rate, so that what apparently was going on is that they had various conduits and things underground for the electrical and other types of infrastructure for the whole site, and the perk has been percolating through those conduits, and so they are trying to identify where it is, how much of it is, and try and get it out there, get it out of there. So that's again good, and it's probably something that would need to be done in terms of reuse in any case before you can use it for most things. Particularly if you wanted to talk about residential, you'd have to get rid of the perk first. So those are good signs. I did connect up with Darren Renaletti, and he has said that he's interested. He would be willing to meet along with us with the people from TRC. He thought we could try and get somebody from the planning department who is technically the people who are directly in charge. His only involvement would be in terms of if they're going to try and do housing. He'd be very interested in that, because that's his current position is looking at housing for the city. But he also told me that the planning department right now is having a severe problem with lack of personnel. They're very shorthanded. So we may or may not be able to get anybody from planning to participate in a meeting. It certainly would be good if we could. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I have not heard anything further from TRC. I'm thought we'll wait until the beginning of June. I'm sorry, the beginning of April. And if I haven't heard anything from them by the beginning of April, I'll ping them to remind them that we were supposed to talk about setting up a meeting. And so that's, I think, pretty much what I have to report on the shops at the Ridge site. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to it? Okay. The second item I wanted to just mention briefly was what's going on with the CCA, California College of Arts project. And I have not been able to get very much. I tried calling up the planner who's handling that, and her message on her phone says, "Send me an email." So I sent her an email, and I got an email back. I sent that off yesterday. Got an email back today. I had suggested we'd like to set up an appointment to view the documents from the file, and what she said is they are not open as of yet. That it is not possible to go in and look at anything. They are not allowing people into the building. Now, I don't know, maybe this is for different purposes. It may be that if you're actually doing an application for some sort of project, they'll let you in. But if you're just wanting to look at files, they're not doing that. What she did do was send me a link to where they have a bunch of the files available online. And so I downloaded, there were something like 23 files that are available. And I think a lot of them are ones you've already seen. If any of you have been looking in the past, there's a lot of the preliminary plans and some of the preliminary environmental stuff that like the scoping. There's about 3 or 4 large files of scoping comments that were submitted by people from the public. Interestingly, I didn't see ours. I know we did submit some, but I didn't find. But I didn't look. I haven't looked through it carefully. I just got that. I downloaded all that today. If those people are interested, what I can do is I can forward to you a link to how you get access to the files that are online in the planning department. But there's not much. It's basically all of the application materials that that the developers submitted to the city. There is nothing there from the consultants. There are no notes or anything, or no other, really almost no correspondence between the developers and the consultants and the city. So not much to see. And at some point, maybe when we can get access to the files, we'll be able to see something. Or the other option would be to submit a Public Records Act request. Okay, yeah, I'll send that out. What I'll do is I'll send it out to everybody who's participating tonight. I'll send that link out to people. Um, and maybe next month we could talk some more about it, but you know, it certainly, there was no indication as to where things are in terms of progress. The last one I talked to her on the phone, which was about maybe a month ago, she was saying sometime in the spring would be when the draft EIR would come out. Well, we're in the spring now, and so we'll see. Um, but that's about all there is to report on that. We still, and the other one, the other item that would be worth mentioning is where we are with the College Avenue Safeway mitigation. And I haven't talked to Andrew lately, but I don't know of any progress on that. We were going to try and set up a meeting with Dan Kalb to go over where we want to go with this, because the idea would be to try and see if he's willing to put something in front of the city council to direct the planning director to designate someone to act in his place. So that's, we don't know where that's going to go, but we'll see. Let me see, other things. Let me look here. I was going to look up what I'd put out on the agenda. Just a second while I look that up. Oh, looking in the wrong folder. Okay, yeah, so those were the two of the items that I wanted to give updates on. The other main topic that I wanted to talk about tonight and get some input on is where we stand with the discussion guide for the housing study. And I've gotten to the point, I started working on chapter 5, which was going to be looking at the various alternative scenarios and figuring out what can we say about those alternative scenarios based on the results of the analysis of feasibility that's been done. And as I started working on it, I realized that there's some things that we need to put in there that I hadn't fully thought through. Namely, one of the thoughts I had was, well, one of the options needs to be what you might call the no project alternative, where we don't change anything. But things have changed. We haven't changed them, but the legislature has. So we have AB9, or rather SB9, that has been enacted. And we have some legislation over the last couple of years in terms of ADUs that has happened. And those, both of those could have some effect in terms of additional housing being built within Rockridge without any other changes in terms of changes in land use policy by the city. So one of the things we need to look at is to figure out what are going to be the effects or what can be expected to be the effects from both ADU construction and from SB9's application to Rockridge. I frankly, based on the feasibility, I don't think we're going to see people tearing down existing homes and trying to put up duplexes or fourplexes. That based on the analysis that was done, that simply won't work. But what could be more feasible and might actually end up resulting in a significant amount of additional housing would be people converting an existing single-family home into either a duplex or a fourplex. Not by major construction, tearing down, building up, but by essentially subdividing an existing home into apartments or into condos. And what I would need, I think we're going to need on that is we'll need some estimates of what the cost for that would be. which I would imagine would be considerably less than tear down and build up, and consequently that will affect the feasibility. And then what the, essentially we'd have to make some guesstimates as to how much of that, how many people would take advantage of that. So for example, if you were an empty nester and you had a single family home with, say, 3 or 4 bedrooms, and the 3 or 4, and most of those bedrooms are sitting unused, you might think, well, why don't I split this up into several apartments and I can rent those other apartments out. And that would provide additional housing, and provide the owner with some additional revenue. And that,
There's a lot of examples of that from the 40s when there was a shortage. In the early 40s during the war, there was a lot of the houses in the neighborhood got divided up and then put back together later. But a big house, it makes sense to have it be modular.
yeah,
And a whole family, when they need a lot of space, could take it all over, and then when they don't need as much space, rent out some of it, and that makes a lot of sense.
do you have any sense about the cost involved?
Well, what you need is to have I think you want to have a separate bathroom and kitchen,
Yeah,
and you need an outside entrance. So it's just how much of that do you have?
yeah,
And, I mean, you don't have to, there's no requirement to make it, be perfect.
yeah.
I mean, just adequate is all that the code requires.
The other thing that I don't know the answer to is, and I think there's supposedly some legislation in the legislature this session about this, but the idea of I think what they're calling shared housing. I actually sometime, let's see, when I was a postdoc for about 6 months, I was in a house that I shared with 3 other people. We were all renting, and we had one common kitchen and one common living room, and each of us had their own bedroom.
Right, that was in my house. That was how we first lived here. 5 unrelated adults sharing the house. We did that for a few years before I bought my partners out and took it over.
Well, those are different. You can do it as more or less like a co-op type of situation, or you can do it where, in the case where I was living, there was an absentee landlord who owned the house and did whatever maintenance needed to be done. But there were 4 of us living there, each with a bedroom and then shared kitchen facilities. And of course, with the shared kitchen facilities, there's a little bit of funkiness that goes on in there. Wait a second, that's not yours, that's mine.
Okay, student,
Yeah, I
there's
saw that
another
mentioned.
issue here about splitting up a house. That it's the planning department will allow all this, but when you go to get the building permit, there's in the building code, there's an occupancy of 1 and 2 units, and then there's 3 or more units. And 3 or more units is an apartment type of zoning. And the building requirements change when you go to an R2 from an R3 occupancy. And
now, would any of that be preempted by SB 9? So let's say you take a lot and you subdivide it.
I don't think so.
Really?
And so the building department, for even creating 1 unit, wants to have a 1 hour fire separation. Anything, if it's below the units above, the walls all have to be there has to be 1 hour fire resistive walls supporting the unit above it. So you have to do fire safety, you have to do sound separation,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on horizontally and vertically
Mm-hmm.
between units. Regardless of one or whether it's two or more units, you have to have the new unit, you have to have the unit that's supporting the one above have fire resistive construction and sound separation.
Tom,
Plus, then,
Yeah.
if you go to 3 units, then they want, it requires the whole building to be 1 hour fire resistiveness and have sprinklers.
whoa,
Oh,
So
wow.
the building department is is back there with a lot of requirements that the planning department and SB 9 doesn't have. I mean, if you do a separate unit in the yard, then you're only dealing with that. And it depends on how close it is to the property line, depending on how the construction needs to be.
Tom, I see Tom and Jason both want to say something. Tom, what, you had a comment?
So Glenn's got to be an architect, right?
Yes.
You bet.
Yeah, I'm an architect as well. Spent a lot of time on these issues in San Francisco and Marin County.
Uh-huh.
And you're absolutely right about all that stuff. And what's happening at the state level, having been on the Building Standards Commission Advisory Council, is that the code isn't really working. I mean, it doesn't change as fast as planning law can change in the legislature, right? Which is also a pretty slow process to begin with, right? So I think what you're going to see is what you've seen happen in these neighborhoods, you know, in the 40s and 50s, like Glenn was referring to, is that you're going to see somebody, if, you know, particularly the units where you got to walk up almost a full level to get to the main floor, you know, they tuck the accessory dwelling unit underneath. If they can go to a third unit because of some of these new regulations, they can flip the garage. There's nothing in the planning code that says you have to have a private garage, and they can make the garage a studio unit. They just got to get the plumbing in. And I don't think East Bay Mud's too hard on their, you know, as long as they got a single line, they'll just, you know, common area the sewer fees, right? Sewage fees. And they can even do that with the electricity and just prorate it. So I think what you're probably going to see, if anything, is a lot more of this, you know, vertical subdividing. My kids just stayed in an Airbnb up on Ocean Avenue above Broadway, where the lower level of the unit's now an Airbnb, right? Helps them pay for their mortgage or whatever. So I think you're going to see densification like that. At the same time, you're going to see people like reclaiming parts of buildings as their family grows, if they're raising a family, right?
Yeah. So it'll be going both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be going, and I think the flexibility of it, you know, to have, you know, 2 elderly people in a 2 or 3 or 4,000 square foot house, maybe 2,000 is enough. Mine's not that big, and believe me, we could use more space. But you know, I don't think you're going to see people tearing down homes that they pay $1.2 million for on a quarter acre of land, or even on, you know, a lot of these lots are 1/10 of an acre or less.
Right.
Which means that this 1 unit per 10, you know, 10 units per acre, right? You can't add another unit except under the accessory dwelling unit provisions.
Well,
right?
except under AB 9,
That doesn't.
I mean, SB 9 rather, you can.
Yeah,
What's
but
that
it's
mean?
not
I don't
allowed.
think, I think what the analyses that we had been doing indicate is it doesn't pencil out.
Mm-mm.
To tear down it. The only way you can do add units without having it be excessively expensive is to convert rather than build.
But SB 9, if maybe I'm getting my wires crossed here, but isn't that the one that gives you 10 dwelling units per
No.
acre?
That's SB 10. And
That's
it's
it.
not 10,
what's
it's
SB?
10 dwelling units per parcel.
I think it's 10 per acre.
No,
I think SB 9 is you can split your lot and
Right.
have 2 houses.
you can
And
split your lot, you can have a duplex on each of the 2 lots, and you
That's
can have an ADU for each of those duplexes.
or you
And what's
can 3 on one and 1 on the other.
what's the minimum lot size though?
That's not really well defined. I think there's a minimum of 1,200 square feet is the minimum lot size, which is pretty damn small.
I think it might be like 2,500 square feet, but I'm not sure.
I think it's
So
lower.
you could carve up a 4,000 square foot lot into 3, right? Or a 5,000
Well,
square.
The thing is this only allows you to do one lot split. You can only do a 2 for 1. So you're only allowed to split a one lot into 2. You can't go to 3 or you can't go to 4, but what you can do is do a duplex on each of the 2 lots.
Well, what would make sense is if Oakland could use their mini lot program, for this and allow those standards, then that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
At any rate, the thing about this is it's more complicated than I thought it was going to be, because all of a sudden there's a lot more going to be going on under what I was thinking would be a very sleepy no project alternative. The no project alternative is not going to be so sleepy.
Yeah.
And there was a study. The city had looked into how many ADUs had been constructed in Oakland over the last few years, and Darren Renletti sent me a link to where I can download that study. So we can get a hold of that.
I have another couple of pieces of information on this. I mean, we've been doing a lot of this stuff in the office recently.
Okay.
There is a junior ADU and an ADU, and the difference is probably 500 square feet. And the junior ADU is like taking a room,
Right.
and then sharing some facilities with the rest of the house. It's under 500 square feet. The regular ADU can be a lot larger. It can be 800,000 square feet. It can be a separate building.
I think 800.
Those units are there. The regular ADU, they're now asking to have separate meters for them. And I'm not sure about water meters, but electric for sure.
Yeah.
And then we also did find an exception for the fire, the increased fire requirements.
Yeah.
And that is that you can go to Oakland zoning's interactive map and not in the and search an address, and not in the bubble for that address, but if you click on the building itself, then you'll get an entire history about you'll get 2 pages of what Oakland thinks about that building and or that property.
Yeah.
And if you get it, you go to the historic rating. If it's C or a B rating, you can use the California Historic Building Code and only work on you don't have to work on
So
the
in other
whole
words,
building.
it gives you a pass on some of the extra requirements that the building code would otherwise require, because
they're still going to want you to show them how you are meeting these requirements, but you don't have to take apart the historic part with all the beautiful trim and siding and all of that. And so it's interesting, it's
yeah. Let me see.
we have one
I
of
see
those.
Jason also
Let you
wanted
know
to
when I get through it.
let's let just Jason have a say.
Well, I just wanted to go back, if you could, and just get some context on what your original set of questions was for Chapter 5. I mean, what are the scenarios? Is it basically different upzonings that might occur?
Yeah, it's the idea is to have. We're looking at probably about 4 alternative scenarios. One would be kind of if you're familiar with the SB 27 that was put out about 3 years ago by Wiener, and that was going to have 5 stories on small streets and 11 stories on large streets within a half mile of a transit station. So the idea would be that you would upzone to 11 stories maximum on Broadway and maybe Claremont, and most of the smaller streets like College, it would be 5 stories. And the
Yeah.
question is, and now what the analysis that was done was that at least in terms of the 5-story, it's probably not going to make a big difference because for the most part, the lots are small enough that it doesn't make sense to try and go up to 5 stories. You'd have to purchase 3 or 4 lots to make it even possible. But then the problem there is with the land values around here as high as they are, the cost is too high. You're
Right.
you know, in other words, to put together a big enough parcel to be able to do a decent 5-story building, you're talking about a cost that makes a 5-story building not work out.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, and that's why my suspicion is that at least for the time being, that's not going to end up resulting in very much change. Although again, if you starting looking down the road, say 10 years out or 15 years out, who knows whether the land prices are going to continue to climb. We simply don't know.
Hey, Stu,
Yeah.
this is Tom Lolini. I haven't seen this land use study, but could I get a look at it? I'm just curious
we've
now.
got. I put up. I'll send around the link to that. I put up the chapters that have been done so far on Dropbox, on a folder on Dropbox, and the
Is
first.
there a draft on chapter 5?
Not yet. I was just starting to work on. That's why I was saying is I realized, whoa, this is going to be more complicated than I thought.
I mean, I've
But-
seen some places like in Chicago,
Yeah.
in suburbs of like Naperville or in Texas, in where was I? In Houston, but where they have 5-story townhouses that are just vertically stacked, right? And they're literally private dwellings that are, 2,000 or 3,000 square feet, right? But they only take up about maybe, I don't know, 20 square feet of street front. I'm not saying that's coming here. I'm just curious as to how this works. What the regulatory context is. So if SB 827, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Is the one, and then there's these other ones, SB 9 and SB 10, right?
Correct.
The 27 didn't,
It's
that was
827
dumped, it didn't. Yeah.
It didn't get enacted.
Good.
In fact, I think it failed in its first committee.
Yeah.
But
That was Wiener's bill.
that was the
from,
first one of
San
Wiener.
That
Francisco?
was
Yeah.
his,
Okay.
his most ambitious one, so.
Yeah. And
You gotta start somewhere.
yeah.
He's trying to solve the housing crisis, right? It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. I've been in this business for 40 years, right?
Ronnie, you had something you wanted to put in to the conversation?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that I think that, in the recent past, because of the way the prices went, you get more money in this area for a single family rather than a duplex
Right.
if you sell it. So I think it might be worth like talking to either Greg Pasquale or some real estate people and find out what they're thinking about if we're gonna end up going to duplexes. Because I know that in the, like us, if we were to split the house, which would be nice to get the rental income, it would require some capital. So we'd have to take out a loan, but we're older. So I don't want to do a reverse mortgage. That's a bad idea. So I'm not 100% sure I would be doing that. And then the people, my neighbors who have moved in, they're like coming from Orinda, the hills. They have a lot of money. They don't want to go to a duplex.
Right. Well, I
So
think
I think it would be good to touch base with Greg Pasquale, some other, I don't know about Ron Chris, but some of the people, maybe the real estate agents from the kitchen tour.
I actually did talk to Greg a while back, and his opinion was this was back actually. I think it was about the time that SB 50 was floating around, and his opinion was it wasn't going to do anything in Rockridge, that there would be no. It simply doesn't pencil out to do the sort of things SB 50 would have allowed you to do. Now, the thing about SB 9 is it's less ambitious, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're building a whole new structure. Again, as Glenn was talking about, it might mean a matter of simply splitting a house up. But of course, as Glenn points out, with Oakland's building code, that may be more than you bargained for. It may be not all that inexpensive to.
I would be guessing 300,000 at the minimum, given that I just did some work on our house.
Mhm.
I mean, you think Glenn, you or Tom, you could make a duplex for 300, or you think it's more?
Yeah, I'm not in the construction business these days, and I know that rates have accelerated. I
Yeah.
mean,
The
I'm in a
cost.
condo
building cost.
association, we just spend a lot of money on a new roof, right?
Yeah.
And it's like $25 a square foot. Now it's a, PVC, highly reflective insulated roof on a condo building, but regardless, you can spend a lot of money doing a few things, and the construction industry generally is pretty accelerated right now. So I don't think he'd be getting rational pricing at this point. But
Again, one of the things we're thinking about is you need to be looking both in the short term and the longer term. And it may well be, if this COVID thing ever lets up, then things may start getting more back to normal. But I mean, we've got lots of different problems that are all going on in terms of people changing jobs and the supply chains being stressed out. And of course now with the Ukraine war, that's got its a whole new set of stresses on the markets. So I don't think we're going to be back to normal anytime in the near future.
I remember when Norma was a Rockridge house cost $250,000.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, in terms of basic feasibility, I think you mentioned in chapter in your draft, somewhere in your draft, that maybe there's some big lots, some big parcels, we've
sort of labeled those as the opportunity sites.
And would these zoning scenarios affect those, or might those be planned unit or something?
Those things are large enough lots that and they're designated right now. Most of the ones. So for example, the biggest opportunity site right now is the Shops at the Ridge Phase 2 area, and which is, I don't remember exactly the acreage.
I think it's about 4.5 or 5 acres.
I think it's something like that, maybe even a little more than that. But
PCA is 4.5 acres.
Yeah, and the in terms of usable space, I think that the Shops at the Ridge site is maybe a little bit bigger. But at any rate, the point is that it's zoned community commercial, which essentially means you can put anything you want there. You can go up to 8, I think it's 8 stories. And
is housing allowed in community commercial?
Housing is allowed in pretty much anything. You can do mixed use, you can do housing, you can do retail, you can do office, you name it. It's all possible. Plus, it's a large enough lot that you could probably do a PUD.
PUD, yeah, right.
It's that.
Hey, Janice, has anybody been able to talk to these people, the rich people? I know there's been some conversation about cleaning up the site, but
well, so you've been missing. We've been going around on this for probably the last 6 months.
I heard you say earlier you haven't been able to get a hold of them or something, right?
Well, the problem is, you see, there's 2 parts of the puzzle, or at least 2 parts of the puzzle. There's a master tenant, which is TRC, which is a Southern California developer, and they are very enthusiastic about trying to do some sort of housing mixed use project, maybe like retail on the first floor and maybe 4 floors of apartments above that, apartments or condos. But the owners is a family corporation based in San Francisco, and they have put it in the master lease, no residential allowed. And the people from TRC went and talked to them about it, and what they said was, oh yeah, well, we'll let you do residential there. And then they proceeded to tell them how much extra it was going to cost, which is an arm and a leg. And TRC was not particularly interested in giving up an arm and a leg just to build a residential.
But what did they get approved in their master plan by the city? Didn't they have housing on top of commercial in their?
No, it was mixed use without housing.
No housing.
No.
There was an
Well,
alternative
Yeah.
that had housing.
There was
It
a
was like,
possible future phase 2 or phase 3, I guess, given that they
Yeah.
didn't have 2, it was.
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to take up your time educating me. I'm,
That's okay.
late to the party, so.
Yeah,
we tried very, very hard back when they first did that to get housing. And so after a lot of screaming and yelling, they put that extra
yeah,
alternative in.
okay, well, we'll leave, basically what they had was they had a lot of surface parking, and they said, well, we could take away some of that surface parking and use that for a phase 3 that would be residential.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think the right path is get the city declared a blighted site and force them into development.
No, that's,
It's-
I don't
it's-
think that's blighted.
It's a tricky thing. At the moment, it is a little bit blighted, but
It's blighted.
I mean, I suppose you could always try and take it by eminent domain, saying, well, it's blighted, so it's not going to cost very much to take it. But given the zoning, I don't think that would fly very well.
Legally, it's not blighted. It's just really ugly.
Yeah, I don't consider that blighted.
I mean, they are in violation of some of the blight ordinances, the
Yeah.
fence and a couple of other
Now,
things.
Janice, you're right across the street there, right? Have you seen?
Yeah, a block away.
Yeah, I've been hearing that they're starting to do some cleanup there.
Well, they whacked the weeds.
Yeah.
Just nice. And they repaired a couple of holes in the fence.
Okay.
But it's still a construction fence and it's not an active construction site. So that's an illegal fence,
Uh-huh.
which they said that, I don't think they're interested in replacing it because it's pretty expensive. But they still have other issues with telecommunications equipment that's exposed. There are ADA issues on the sidewalk along Pleasant Valley that's too narrow for regular ADA compliance. So they have some other problems that they need to deal with.
Yeah. But the big problem is just that the property owner is not particularly interested in moving towards residential. And I know I've talked to the people from TRC and they basically pleaded with him, saying, "Come on, if you want to, you do anything with this site. The thing to do is you do residential. This is the time. You got to do it."
Yeah, as I understand it, Stu, and I've met with TRC too.
Yeah.
Through UBA, TRC has said that they would be happy to do housing, but that it would be prohibitively expensive because they have to renegotiate their whole contract with the owner.
Yeah.
So there's the only impediment is money and profit, potential profit that TRC wants to make, which we understand they're in the business to do that, and we all get that.
So are they paying, does anybody know, are they paying a residual rent until it's developed according to their original plan?
Not very
And
much.
therefore, they're not paying the full rent that they would have to pay if they developed it?
That's right.
Right. And they're getting some revenue from the cell phone towers. So, it's probably not that expensive for them to hold on to it.
Yeah.
So,
And given that the ownership has not changed, they
No.
still got taxes that go back to the 1960s
Mhm.
or 1977, I guess, was when
Yeah.
Prop 13 went through. So
Right.
the pricing, the taxes that they're paying are minimal.
right. So it's
So you're
not,
not waiting for somebody to die like the other two sites across the street, right? If it's a family corporation.
Well, that's what this one is. It's a family corporation. And what I understand is that the as it were, the senior person did die, but it hasn't changed anything.
no. It's the sons, the two sons are running the corporation right now.
Yeah. And,
So-
I don't know. I think if we can set up this meeting with TRC and maybe also with Darren Ranaletti, we can discuss strategy about what could the city do to try and promote getting that into some sort of productive use. But obviously there's some limits as to how far you can go.
Sounds like they're not very good negotiators to me, but I mean, there's a lot of money to be made on that site if the city gives them enough density, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what, housing or in terms of other types of use?
Housing, yeah.
But the
of
problem
money
is
to
that
be
essentially if they go towards housing, the problem is the owner is basically asking confiscatory rents.
Well, that's what they say, but if you put 1,500 units on there, and at the end of the day, he can only get what he can get, right? I mean, they're not gonna do charity work, but
Right.
I don't know.
I know,
Sounds like
it's
Wait.
not a simple problem. We
No, it's
University
not.
of California, Berkeley needs to build some student housing pretty fast, so maybe we should talk to them. Having worked there for 15 years, they're in a hard way right now.
Well, through UVA, we've certainly talked to TRC, and maybe RCPC has too,
Yeah.
to try and get them to partner with a nonprofit developer who has different pools of money that they can draw from. It's all very competitive money, but maybe that would put it over the edge to try and get some workforce housing, which would be really nice to see in Rockridge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, UC doesn't have money right now,
Yeah.
Berkeley anyway, but they have demand.
Yeah.
Yep, they really do.
And student rents are about market rent per square foot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know, it's not going to be an easy nut to crack.
That is true. That is true.
But at any rate, so where we're at the moment in terms of this discussion guide is I'm wondering if any of you folks would be interested in working on the as it were the looking at the no project option, and looking at the ideas of subdividing a house, and and some of these more creative ways using SB 9 and using the ADU laws. And what could one foresee happening here in Rockridge in terms of applying those? I don't know, Glenn, does that at all interest you? The Stone Fez says, I don't think so.
Oh, I have so many things to do.
Okay.
Stu, I'll help out.
Okay.
But please, why don't you, I don't have box. Please send me everything you have in just an attachment to an email. And then
Okay.
you and I can talk, and I'll figure out some way of working with you on that chapter and perhaps some of the others.
Yeah. Okay.
Mark, through Cal, we all have box accounts. We don't have Dropbox, but box we have.
Well, I'm at Hastings, so I haven't signed up for Box or Dropbox.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
I'm just,
the chapters are not very large in terms of size, so I could probably just simply put them as an email attachment to and send it out to everybody who's on the list for these meetings. And that way you'll have where we are at the moment. So that, yeah. Most of the other parts I'm not as worried about as that one, because the just trying to figure out what we do about the ADU and SB 9. I hadn't thought about it until then. When I got there, I realized, Jesus, I don't know what to do with these.
David Garcia might also be a good resource.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about building, so I'm not any good on that. But if you want somebody to just summarize SB 9 or other regulatory changes or legislative changes, I'm certainly happy to take a whack at that.
Okay. Well, what I probably should do is spend a little bit of time just fleshing out. When we first started this, we had, I think, 4 scenarios that we were working on, and they've sort of shifted around a bit because when we first started off, the thought was we were going to use SB 827 as one of the scenarios, and then when we started doing the feasibility, it didn't look like that was really going to work at all. But there may be, maybe looking at what the possibilities with SB 10 as applied to Rockridge would be maybe a better scenario. And that one where it's 10 units per lot. Which, of course, if you're doing single family lot, you're certainly not going to go up 10 stories.
I have another comment. The housing update for the general plan.
Yeah.
that should be out like in May, and I suspect they're gonna have some regulations in there in compliance with SB 9 and 10, particularly for Rockridge.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Have any of you guys been going to those workshops? I have, and I know Leonora and Ronnie have. If any of you have the time to do it, they're interesting. The focus is mostly not on, at least from what I can see, the focus is not on Rockridge. It's really focusing more on the areas that are right now the lower income areas, and seeing whether they could add more affordable housing in some of those areas. And of course, those are the areas where affordable housing is more affordable because the land prices aren't as high.
Stu, can I ask?
Yeah. Sure.
Wait a second, I have to unmute myself. Am I muted?
But we hear you.
You're
Yeah, okay. I've been meaning to sort of poke my head into that out of curiosity. A friend of mine is currently the chair of the planning commission, but I think he steps off here in a few months. And are they looking at corridor analysis, like how many units they can put in various higher density or transportation corridors that typically have higher density?
They haven't gotten down to that
planning
level of
or-
detail yet. That was
And what
certainly,
about, that's not part of their scenario analysis?
it's not really. No, they're much more generic at the moment. It's that was part of when they did the rezoning.
Well, that's
back in,
kind
I think it was
of
2014.
generic, actually.
That was a lot of what they did was corridor analysis, and looking particularly at the transit corridors and trying to upzone the transit corridors.
When they looked at zoning, not the general plan?
Well, the general plan, we're still working with a 1999 general plan. And that was Jerry Brown's baby. And I think that did have, that laid the groundwork for that upzoning along the transit corridors. Because that the whole strategy there was to focus on downtown growth and the transit corridors. And then, of course, we've also got the fact that the transit stations are, I'm trying to remember what the term they use for that is. I'm blanking on the term, but there's another term that is in the general plans. It's in state planning law that basically provides extra density or encourages extra density in transit hubs.
Like within a mile of a bus stop or something, or?
Yeah, well, it's more generic. Actually, if you look at the Oakland,
I'll take a look at it. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
That's enough.
I'm just blanking on the term. I could kick myself. I can't think of the term.
Transportation oriented development, TODs.
No, these are places in cities where they they've changed the nomenclature around now. They tend to call them resource rich areas now, but they had another term for them. But if you look at the map where they show them in Oakland, about 2/3 of the city is these areas where they're encouraging more development.
Oh, really? So it's tied to bus stops, not BART, obviously.
It's tied to any sort of transit, major transit routes, bus stops, major transportation corridors. Even if they don't have buses, even if it's just auto, they're saying these are the places we want to have more development.
Well,
that's the 1999 general plan that's all working off of, and the new one doesn't have any. At least I haven't seen any detail of exactly how they're going to structure it.
are they still in the input phase, or are they actually putting out information?
It's still input.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, Dave. Does anyone happen to remember when the next workshop is? I know they had one, I think it was last Saturday.
Yeah, that was a town hall, right?
Yeah. And I don't know when the next one is scheduled. I don't think they announced when the next one was scheduled.
I just got a sign up email that I'm about to try to go find for the the next one.
Oh.
It's soon.
Uh-huh. Well, if people, I tell you what I can do is, again, I can, when I get notified of that, I can send out to this whole group what I find out about it, how you sign up for that.
Was
They're
there
all
any,
being done on Zoom.
since I was out of town
Uh-huh.
with that, was there a, what happened on Saturday? Was there anything different than in the stuff I've been going to?
Not all that much. It seemed like they just sort of went through a lot of the same stuff that they'd already gone through before. I guess maybe they were thinking this was for a larger crowd.
Mm. Okay.
But I don't know, Leonore, did you happen to notice anything? I didn't see very much new there.
It was pretty. It wasn't terribly different from what they were talking about before. The subject was different, but okay. I just
Oh,
found
that's right. They spent a lot of the time was spent talking about rents and how to maintain affordability in rents and how to
right.
prevent
was it.
gentrification from ripping the city apart.
Okay,
What
so
was-
that was the workshop. The first town hall is coming up on Saturday.
This Saturday.
Yes, from 10 to 12.
Okay.
And it's what they say is an overview of the general plan update and background information on planning topics such as land use, environmental justice, safety, parks and open space, transportation, etc. Fun interactive activities to gather community input on issues and priorities for the city. What issues do you care about the most? Sign up and let us know.
Doesn't sound much different from the last one.
It doesn't sound particularly different from the last one at all. The other thing that they've been doing is although I believe the input period is closed, but they had an interactive map where you could drop a pin on parcels that you thought would be good places to add housing.
Right. So pick your neighbor.
So, and Rockridge is surprisingly devoid of large opportunity sites.
Yeah.
I mean, I dropped a pin on everything I could find. I don't think necessarily College in Claremont, that triangular lot even qualifies as a large opportunity site, but I put a pin there. But that's, I believe that comment period is closed.
Right.
So that mapping is not available anymore. Ronnie, do you know?
It was closed on the 5th of March.
Yeah,
That
it's
was when
been
they
closed for a
closed.
while.
But
I
that's
thought
what I
they were going to
remember.
extend it for another week or something.
It's closed.
Yeah.
But there was, Rockridge is built up, so there's not much there. I think we all put in something for the DMV when it reaches its end of life, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, the back parking lot has already reached its end of life, as I know, because I look out on it every day and it's usually pretty empty.
Tom, did you have something else another comment you wanted to make? I know you still have your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I just was not paying attention.
I really get the feeling though from the ones I've been to that they haven't. It's not like the way Glenn you described it because I was on the board when you were going to the last one. This is a very different process. It's very. They're talking about equity, which of course is now what everyone talks about, but they're not getting representatives for the neighborhoods at all, like you were appointed by RCPC. That's not how it's happening. And I think we're all making a bit of a fuss saying, you got to go out to the community groups, but they haven't. They've been going out a lot to East Oakland, to community events to try and get input. So they're trying to go out for the input to the groups that haven't normally been involved in this.
Right.
Is the staff running this? Is there a consultant?
There's a consultant and there's someone on staff who's working on it.
Who's the
But it-
consultant? Does anyone?
Batia Diab.
Hang on, it's. Okay, the most recent invitation came from.
I'll wash my hands and go look.
Hold on, let me see.
You can tell me later, that's all right.
Yeah, actually,
I'm
the
just
housing interactive map, they did extend for a couple of days.
Let's see.
I think one of the planning strategies these days is to not go directly to the sort of representatives of the neighborhoods or special interests, like, whatever the business, Chamber of Commerce or whatever, right? But to go directly to the people and try to get that sort of underlying, ground plane feedback. Most people, like probably won't go on and try to figure out on an interactive map where to put a pin, but it gives them, having done this at campuses, you sort of bring all the students in because you're hoping to generate enough interest that at least the representative organizations within the community of students, right? Example, your faculty, eventually show up and start participating, so they can't just complain about it at the end and say they never were consulted. It's like a, it's a strategy. I'm not saying it's a bad strategy. It's a, how do you get people's input so they don't feel like they didn't have a say in it at the end of the day, right? And I'm just kind of curious whether or not they're even exploring opportunities for new neighborhoods, right? Instead of building a stadium, and high-rise office buildings, maybe there's a neighborhood down there somewhere. I know that's not on the mayor's agenda, but, and I don't know Oakland, to be honest with you, well enough to know where all these opportunities are, like Brooklyn Basin, right, is really evolving as a new place in the city. And I think that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, although one of the things that I know there's a fair amount of unhappiness about is they put all of the affordable units right next to the freeway.
Yeah, developers do that if the cities let them,
Yeah,
right? It's the city has the power to push that thing, right? At the same time, nowadays units have to be sufficiently insulated when they're proximate to the freeway that you don't necessarily hear all that noise, right?
So the consultant on at least on the housing element update is Diet and Batia.
that's it.
Oh, boy, I've heard that name, but it's
Dyette and Bhatia.
Yeah, I was looking.
BHATI. Yeah, I think they're out Walnut Creek or something.
Can they get going? So
Yeah.
I'll
right.
talk to
Yeah,
everyone.
I got to check out too, but thank you for that. I'll check these guys out and see what's going on.
Okay, and I will send around the chapters, and I'll also send around that link to the information about well, let's see, there were a couple of different. There's some information that I got from Darren about the ADU study, so I'll send that around as well.
Great.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Take care.